video for you. And today's topic is knife materials and pricing. What causes certain knives to jump up in price, and why the disparity in price if there's not a lot of stuff going on in the creation of the knife. For this video, I'm not using any kind of a phone stand or anything. I'm just holding the phone with my one hand, and I'm going to attempt to do this video using my other hand, which makes shooting this thing quite difficult. But I wanted to do this video anyway in the closed and caption of my car. So let's just get right down to it. As you get into this hobby of knife collecting, your taste will change. You're going to see other knives that have some other things on them that may look aesthetically pleasing to you. And as the progression of your knife collecting goes, your taste will change and you will discover new things about knives and knife makers that you didn't know about. So and that can be quite rewarding in a way. And I guess that's pretty much what this video is all about. So let's go ahead and get right into this. So I've got three knives here in front of me. Each one of these knives comes from a different region of the world. This is made by Clyde Challenor. This is called the Clyde Challenor Raptor. Clyde Challenor hails from South Africa. This knife is made by Jean-Pierre Martin. It's called the Tritico Flipper. And this one is called the Noah MK2 by Japanese knife maker Du Hara. So this guy's French. So we have a South African knife maker, we've got a French knife maker, and we have a Japanese knife maker. Each of these three guys gave us a different interpretation of this tool, and each knife maker went a little bit more extreme than the other, which is pretty much what this video, I guess, is about, because they're totally three different knives made with completely different materials. And again, that's what this knife video is all about. So when you begin to get into custom knife buying, the basics of what the knife is made of, for the most part, like this knife here by Clyde Challenor, it's going to be titanium. Okay, so this is the Clyde Challenor Raptor. The knife is, there's nothing else on the knife. It's just titanium, straight through, all the way, straight titanium. Excuse me. But there are other reasons why a knife can be so expensive. First of all, a titanium knife is not cheap by the basic means. I mean, a lot of you guys that are into production knives, you know that your average titanium knife will probably run you right around $260 if it's really well made, or $240, around that price. I mean, I think a good example of $260 basic titanium custom knife would probably, not custom knife, but production knife, would probably be the 00562 by Zero Tolerance, the titanium version. That knife's about $260. So titanium knives are not cheap, but when you're dealing with a custom knife maker, the price is going to jump because there are a lot of other details that are on the knife that you were probably not made aware of. And also don't forget the time that it takes to make the knife. Plus, you are getting a one-of-a-kind handmade piece. Now, Clyde Challenor approaches knife making a little bit differently than the other two that I'm going to do here in a second. Clyde Challenor is a firm believer in what I call the 50-50 method in making knives. Half CNC machining, half details made by hand. So that's what makes him so different. But yet you're still getting a made by hand piece. Now, bear in mind, again, this video is about materials. There's just titanium on this. There's nothing else on the knife, just titanium. But what makes the knife so expensive is the time that it takes to intricately do the details to make the knife as special as it can be. So, for example, if you take a look at this knife, we've got this sort of pattern on the front of the knife, sort of like a maze. And what's interesting about this maze on the knife, if that's what you want to call it, that's what I'm calling it, is the fact that not only is it different, not only do you have this sort of machine pattern on the front of the knife, but it's different on the other side. It's not exactly the same. Two different patterns on different sides of the knife. Now, Clyde Challenor made 50 of these knives, 50 of these Raptors, and each of the 50 Raptors, the pattern on it, on both sides, are completely different. So that's basically what you're paying for. Plus, there's all the details, the pivot screws. If you take a look at the pivot screws on there, it's got this sort of cross on it. And if you look even closer, in between this area here, you know, where you see the, I guess that little triangle in there, if you look a little closer, it's kind of hard to see, but there are like sort of these streaks that shoot out like a shooting star. Those are the little details that Clyde Challenor put on the knife to make it much more unique and much more special. So on top of that, you're also getting a knife that runs on ball bearings, right? And the action's really nice and smooth. You're paying for all that because it takes time to tune the knife to get it to this level for purchase. And believe me, when I tell you that Clyde Challenor is an anal knife maker, I say that as a compliment. He makes knives in a way that if he were going to buy it, this is the way the knife's got to be. So they were going off of his standards for how a knife should be executed, and he's got a lot of pride in that. And that's why I've chosen this knife for this video to talk about just the basic material of titanium and what he's done to it to conform to make the price of the knife at least make sense to you as a knife collector in your mind. This is probably going to be the only time I'm ever going to talk about prices. So the price for this knife is right around $1,100, just because of all the detailed work that he puts into it. It is just spectacular work. And he does that with just one material, titanium, right? So now let's move on to the next knife. And you'll notice in the video that when I'm talking about these knives, the materials for each of the knife are going to be elevated. Okay, so now we're getting into Jean Pierre. I keep saying Pierre. Jean Pierre Martin, the Tritico flipper. Okay, so this one is by French knife maker Jean Pierre Martin. Again, he's a French knife maker. So if we take a look at this knife, we can see that this knife is a completely different make, using different materials. He doesn't just have first of all, he doesn't have any titanium on this knife, right? This knife is all carbon fiber handles. Very, very light, very, very nice. Very nice and smooth. The knife, believe it or not, as smooth as you're looking at it, it does not run on ball bearings. It runs strictly on washers, and Teflon washers, no less. But he achieves the same feeling of smoothness with Teflon washers that other knife makers create with ball bearings. So that's kind of a plus right there. He's doing something a little bit different in his knife making than say Clyde Challenor does. Now, what he takes away with the Teflon washers, because Teflon washers are not very expensive. They're a lot cheaper than using ball bearings, also less time consuming. But if you think about it, There's other things that he's done on this knife to add to that. So he's taken away something, ball bearings, but he's added something else to the knife. I'm going to show you what that is. First of all, we're getting a all carbon fiber piece. Just really beautiful. If you take a look at the way the knife was constructed, keep this in mind. Unlike Clyde Challenor, Jean-Pierre Martin makes knives completely by hand. There are no machines being used in the construction of this knife. He makes knives completely by hand. So right then and there, a lot of the pricing is going to go into the man hours that it takes to create this piece. So he's got an all carbon fiber knife here. The inlays are black Damascus. Black Damascus is not cheap. So we've got inorganic materials that he's chosen to make the knife. So this is basically an inorganic knife, a knife made with inorganic materials. I think it's kind of important to stress that because that's going to come into play when I talk about the next knife that's coming up. But basically, Jean-Pierre Martin has created his interpretation of this tool, or of what he considers a knife. Now, the way he's constructed his knife, a lot of his money mostly went into the time that it takes to create the knife. His detail on it is unmatched, and it pretty much matches Clyde Challenor's, but the difference is Clyde Challenor believes in the 50-50 theory in making knives, half CNC machining, half made by hand detail. Jean-Pierre Martin is all about completely constructing a knife by hand, no machines. That's a different level of knife making. And he's doing it, he's doing it in a way that makes the knife much more compelling. So these two knife makers are getting to the same place, but they're both creating a knife in a different manner than, say maybe a production company might make a knife. So again, so let's get back. I don't want to get off on my topic, but again, the knife is made with Teflon washers, but what he takes away, he gives back to you in another form. Now, the black Damascus on this, you have to consider this much. This was polished by hand. This was shaped by hand. And there's something else that Jean-Pierre Martin did on this knife. There's actually a pocket clip on this knife. And this is where the takeaway is. So we may lose something. Maybe you might feel you're losing something, but you're actually not in the action of the knife, because he used Teflon washers as opposed to ball bearings. But he gives something back to you there that you may think you've lost, and that is, where is this pocket clip? Okay, now we're getting into ingenuity a little bit. Okay, so where's the pocket clip on the knife? I don't see it, but actually here it is. Now, as you guys can see, I'm pressing my thumb, pressing down on it. What happens is this pocket clip, I can't do it on camera, but the pocket clip will actually raise up about 1/16 of an inch to allow you to fully clip it onto your pants all the way to the end. I'm going to use my pinky all the way to the end there to clip onto your pants. And I thought that was pretty ingenious. Now, if you're thinking that that's easy to create, we have no idea how long it took for Jean-Pierre Martin to literally figure out how to get a pocket clip onto this knife. Because don't forget, this is a one-of-a-kind handmade piece, right? It's not like he's going to make 5 or 10 or 100 of these, and it'll get faster and faster each time he makes the hidden pocket clip. It's not. This is a one-of-a-kind handmade piece, and that's what makes this knife so special. That, plus the fact that if you take a look at the fit and finish of this knife, it is so tight. There are there's no imperfections on it whatsoever. The knife just runs nice and smooth. The mirror polish that he put, and this isn't really a mirror polish, but you can see, like, my hand, the blue of my watch right there. This is actually a satin hand rub knife, but he made it kind of a mirror polish, which I thought was kind of interesting. I've never seen that on a knife. That takes time to do also. That's not an easy thing to do. Plus, to put the knife together, to get all of the fit and the finish that tight, that takes a lot of time. And of course, carbon fiber is not cheap. And the black Damascus the Damascus on this knife is not cheap, because he did it on both inlays. And if you take a look at the inlays, you can't even really tell which side is the pocket clip side. So, I mean, that alone is what makes this knife so interesting. So let's just take a quick look and a quick review of what we've gone and discussed so far. We've got one knife that is all basic titanium, right? Just all basic titanium material, but yet the price is right around $1,100. Now we're heading into inorganic materials. Time put into the knife. A little ingenuity shoved in there, right, with the pocket clip. That's kind of new. I've never seen that before. All these things will add to the price of the knife. The price of this one, guys, is about $1,600 for this knife. Very expensive. So you're getting what you're paying for. And you know that the minute you hold the knife, feel the knife, touch the knife, flip the knife, you know exactly what you're paying for when you get these things. And that is basically the crux of this hobby, is what it is that you are getting out of it as a knife collector. So, basic titanium knife, an inorganic knife made with carbon fiber and Damascus inlays. Now we're going to move to the most interesting knife in my knife collection so far. This piece is made by Dohara from Japan. Excuse me. And this is the most interesting knife I've ever come across. I've actually already done a full-blown video on this one yesterday. If you want to check that video out on my channel, feel free to do so. But I'm just here now to kind of talk about how this knife is grouped in with these other two and why this video even exists at all. So what makes this knife completely different is the fact that we're moving into another category, right? Because that's basically what this video is about. We have basic titanium. We've got inorganic materials like Damascus and carbon fiber. Now we come to the most extreme. Let's just take a look at this knife, because this knife really shows a lot of work in it. Even more work that was put into this knife than the two that you see here. So there's obviously time put on all three, but this one is much more extreme. So let's just take a look at the materials that are made on this knife. Because there's more than two materials being used on this knife. First of all, the knife back bar is made all titanium. Okay, the handles and of course the knife itself. In other words, when I mean the knife itself, I'm not talking about the handles. I'm talking about the basic basis of the knife is titanium. So the back bar and all the silver you see is all titanium. Okay. Now, the second part of this knife is copper. The handles on the knife are all copper. The entire thing is all copper. Now, it doesn't look copper. That's because he actually, I don't know what he did on this knife. But now the copper is kind of colored gray with this, like, sort of grayish black streaks. This is where my knowledge isn't clear. And I already talked to Dohara. I'm waiting for his response. I want to know how he got the copper to turn gray and, this grayish black streak thing going. That took time to do that. So that would be material number 2. Another thing he's done here is take a look at the pivot. He's got a different pivot design. Not only does he have a different pivot design, but the pivot design is high mirror polish. on the outside of the knife. I mean, take a look at how mirror polished that is. And then to show contrast, we got the yin and yang with the flat, I guess, it's got like that flat finish on the yin and yang inside part there. So that takes time to do that. That all adds more to the knife and the time consuming, how time consuming it is. Then we have the blade. There's a lot of stuff going on here. We've got this beautiful VG10 Damascus blade happening. And then on around the inlay here, I'm going to get to the inlay in a second, we've got this sort of apocalyptic look where it almost looks like you found the knife stuck into the sand after an atomic bomb blew off or something, and this is just like the residual or something of the bomb, whatever. That was done by hand. That takes time to do that. So you're now getting into an area where the knife is now being looked at more, literally more than a tool, even more so than the other two knives that you see here. Like I said, it's elevating, right? Basic titanium, inorganic materials with carbon fiber and black Damascus. And then you've got this extreme, because I didn't even get to the other material on the knife, which are these inlays. Now, these inlays that look like stained glass, they are not stained glass. This is called abalone. Now, if you guys aren't aware of what abalone is actually snail seashell. Snail seashell is on my knife. How crazy is that? And it looks like stained glass, basically. Not only is it on the handle, but it's actually, the inlay is actually on the blade itself. And if you're going to ask me, Omar, how the hell did he put the inlay in that? I don't know. I have no idea how he got the inlay. I'm seeing some kind of fastening in there. It might be glue. I don't know, but I've got the knife at an angle, but you can see there's like one spot there, and then there's another spot there where there's something obviously holding the abalone inlay in place. What that is, I don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that. But yeah, the how time consuming it was to make this knife, I don't know, but you can bet it was a lot of man hours. This is another one of one. There you go, one of one by Duhara. This is a one of a kind handmade piece. So that's what makes this knife so compelling. But this is also, when I say this knife is extreme, this may be an area of knife making many of you guys may not want to go into. But I've decided to pull the trigger and do it anyway, and I'm really, really happy that I did, because it just makes me appreciate knives more. Because that's the reason why many of us are into this hobby, is to grow and to learn. Now, abalone snail seashells is an organic material. So, again, we've got just basic titanium elevating to inorganic materials with Damascus and carbon fiber. Now you've got even more materials, because we're talking about copper for the handles, titanium for the base of the knife, these abalone snail seashells on the handle and on the blade. We've also got a Damascus VG10. There's a lot of stuff going on this knife that's not happening on these other two. Now, you would probably think that because there's so much time put in place for this knife, that this knife would be the most expensive on the, I guess, in my glove box here, if you will. But believe it or not, this is actually the least expensive knife. But yet, it's no less compelling than the other two. The price for this knife is about $9.80. So it was even cheaper than the Clyde Challenor. But again, you're still getting a high-quality knife and a hell of a conversation piece, I'll tell you that much. But what makes this knife so different than the other two is the more you look at this knife and compare it to the other two that are on the table, these two can still be seen more as tools rather than an artwork. So if you can picture a scale of 1 to 10, these two on a scale of 1 to 10 of being an art piece, I would say they land somewhere at around a 6 or a 7. This one has gone all the way over to a 9. I'm not saying that it's losing its visual as a tool, because don't forget, this is still a tool. But because the materials and the way the knife has been constructed, it now looks like something that belongs in the Louvre, doesn't it? I mean, that's insane. Would I use this as an everyday carry piece in my pocket? I would maybe use it maybe once or twice and then just not use it all that much, because it is really more of an artistic vision piece in my eye. This is my opinion, in my mind, than these other two knives, because these two are still resembling tools. I could cut open a box with this and not feel like, oh, I'm ruining my beautiful knife. I mean, I would still consider using this knife as a tool more so than, say, this one over here, which is more extreme. But that's pretty much what you're paying for. You're paying for, and this video talks about more than just fit, finish, and quality, because when you're dealing with custom knives, that's a must. But what are all the other extras that you're getting on your custom knife? What makes this hobby so fun? What makes this hobby so accessible to you, and to continue to want to enjoy knives, is the idea that you're learning more things about your hobby that you didn't know before, because now you're branching out, you're stretching out, you're learning that the creation of a knife, and I think that's really what this video is about, the creation of a knife can be practically limitless. But there are some limitations to that thought process. A lot of knife makers have a lot of decisions to make when they're creating their knives. A lot of the things that these guys do with this made-by-hand concept, as opposed to production knife making, is they have a lot of decisions to make. Is the material that I'm using on this knife, is it doable? Is it time-consuming? Is it going to take away from my ability to maximize some sort of a profit as a knife maker? Is it going to be appealing to the public? Are they going to buy what I've made? I mean, this is almost like watching a movie that you're hoping will garner an Oscar. This is almost the same thing, right? Because there is going to come a time when a knife maker is going to be using some sort of a foreign material. He doesn't know whether or not it's going to last. So he has to actually do a lot of research on his end to make sure that he's giving you a high quality product, because if he's not, he's going to be wasting his time, and hence you're not going to buy his knife, and he won't make any money to be able to feed his family, if that makes any sense at all. And those are the kinds of decisions that these knife makers have to make. And the answer to your question, if you're thinking, well, is abalone snail seashell a long-lasting material to use on a knife? The answer is yes. It's practically indestructible, I guess. You could say indestructible. As far as longevity and having that be put on your knife. Because snail seashell, you may think wouldn't be something that, would last on a knife, but in actuality, they have found out that material is very, very durable. The same thing with Damascus. Damascus is also another material that is very, very doable. And you will find that a lot of knife makers will occasionally use materials that are from their culture. That is no more significantly seen than on the Stu Hara Noah MK2 piece that I've got here. He actually did, if he wasn't educated, there's no way he could make this knife. He would have to know that abalone snail shell is a product that would last. And it's actually worth putting on a knife as an art piece. That's something that these knife makers have to decide. Because who knows how they discover these materials? Word of mouth, walking around. I mean, you don't know. You just don't know. So when we're talking about high-priced custom knives, this is just one of the reasons why the knives are so expensive. It's, I mean, not barring the concept that fit, finish, and quality is a must. That's already on the table, right? But the materials that they use, the time that it takes to put the knife together, because what if Duhara discovered that that it would take him forever just to shape these abalone snail seashells into this shape? Well, the clock's running. That means that he's going to have to hike up the price of the knife. No one's going to buy it. These are things that these guys have to consider, and think about. But at the end, when the knife is executed properly, and it is executed properly, he's going to have to take the risk and put it out there and see if he gets any bites. And that's some of the things that you guys have to consider as far as what these knife makers go through when they are creating these art pieces, because there's a lot to consider. And hopefully they're going to be able to give you a high quality product, and you're going to feel like you've actually bought something that's worth it. Because what you see here in front of you is basically jazz, isn't it? When I say jazz, each one of these knives are a one-of-a-kind handmade piece. They're never going to be made ever again. Now, he may use abalone snail shells again, right? Probably. But you're going to see it in a different form, or maybe a different color, or maybe a different type of snail seashell. We don't know. But you're never going to see any of these knives ever again made more than once, because when a knife maker says, see if I can get my camera to focus. When a knife maker says one of one, he really means this is the only one you're ever going to see like this. You will never see another one like it ever again. You have to trust the knife maker that is what's going to come into play. So that is it for this video. This is Omar, your knife of the party guy. I'll see you guys in the next video. I hope this video was a little educational for you. It was a lot of fun for me to make. If you guys have any questions, I'm going to give you guys a full shot of all these knives before I close out. If you guys have any questions, please comment. I'm welcoming comments, and I will always answer any comment that's on my channel regarding any of the knives that I put out on my channel. So I really hope you guys were given a little bit of an insight onto why sick people like myself constantly go after this insane hobby and why we are such addicts. I mean, it's just a marvel to me. A hidden pocket clip. That's insane. A hidden pocket clip. And I've always just been a marveler of this. And I admire all of the knife makers that do this for a living, because I mean, I just got a message from Peter Swanepoel, who's a South African knife maker. Thanks for that message, bro, and I'll share that for you in a minute because I can't remember what he said, but it was something about the time that it takes to make the knife. I don't take anything for granted, so I'm assuming that while all the knife makers have incredible skill, I'm going to honestly tell you and say that it's still a hard job to create this artwork. I mean, they make it look easy, right? But I honestly believe that these guys are like taking a long, long time to figure out if they can do something to a knife to make it more compelling than it was the last time they did this. And that's what just keeps pushing them and pushing them and pushing them. And the reason these guys need to be admired is because this is how they feed their families. They're not making millions of dollars doing this. One knife, you never know. It may feed their family for what, day or two, and then they got to go out and make another knife. I mean, it's a hard job, guys, especially if you're doing these things by hand. You have to learn to appreciate that, appreciate their work and how they live. I mean, and what inspired them to make such amazing art pieces. I'm going to close out this video with that thought. You guys leave your comments. I'm just going to sit here and play with myself. So I will see you guys in the next video. Hope I didn't move my camera too much because my hand is getting cramps over here. But I'll see you guys in the next video. My next video will not be on knives. I wish it could be because I don't have that kind of money. My next video will be a long video, but I think you'll find that interesting as well. So I'll see you guys in the next video. You guys have a happy Halloween tomorrow. Keep your kids safe. Keep yourselves safe. And I will talk to you guys next time.